jumpstart your job search and stand out when you're looking for work. So I've got a couple of housekeeping things to begin with. We're recording this session, but cameras and microphones have been disabled, so you won't appear on camera or anything, and you won't be on the recording. Please use the chat to ask questions and make comments. Just be aware that we might read out any questions and comments that you have on the recording. And my lovely colleague Ali will be posting useful tips and links in the chat. And if we have time towards the end, we'll answer some questions from the chat. So please do share anything that you have for our panel. So today we're talking about keeping positive during your job search. And of all the topics that we cover in these webinars, I think this is maybe the most important. Job searching can be like so hard, and it's so easy to get demoralized, and especially if you're not hearing back like about applications, or you're not seeing the vacancies come up that you want. And although it can be hard to like remain optimistic, it's like super important, because being enthusiastic about a new opportunity is like can be a really key factor in getting hired. And it's important to build up your resilience so that you can put your best foot forward when you're job searching, and you can keep that enthusiasm really high. Anyway, luckily, we've got 3 great speakers here today to share some strategies on how you can do that. So let's hear from them now. Claire, do you want to start and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you keep motivated when things don't go to plan, or your experience of job searching?
Okay, absolutely. Hello, everybody. Lots of people pinging in to join us, which is exciting. I'm Claire Gell. I'm HR. Well, at the moment, I'm an HR business partner, but for many years have been sort of a consultant at sort of senior level. Worked in the mostly healthcare sector. I'm working in education at the moment, but worked in a number of industries and been involved in HR for I don't know, lots of many years. I was thinking when I was preparing for this, how many interviews over the years I must have taken part in, both as a panel member and actually myself as well. Obviously, I've myself been a candidate on many occasions, and sharing with you that actually my most tricky time when I was job hunting was during the pandemic. I got made redundant sort of partway through the pandemic, and HR jobs there were just hundreds of people applying for very few jobs out there. You just were everyone was getting very desperate, very worried, you know, were we going to have money coming through, how it was going to be. And I remember that being a really, really difficult time. So for any of you struggling with your job search, and as I say, I really understand, really get it. Okay.
Great, thank you. Sarah, let's hear from you next.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Venables. I'm a HR business partner as well at the University of Worcester, and I've actually been here for 9 years. I'm the current chair of Hereford and Worcester CIPD branch as well. And my recent challenge, I guess, I haven't job hunted for a while, because obviously I've been here for 9 years. But for me, it's finding the right roles that align with my values and trying to unpick that during the search. That's been my challenge.
Great, yeah, thank you. And last but not least, let's hear from Crystal.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really glad, obviously, to be here today. So I'm Crystal Thiel. I'm the Senior People Partner at the Lego Group, and I'm also one of the chairs for Central London CIPD. So in terms of like what motivates me in my struggle, I would say I've been like very fortunate of working for a really good company the last couple of years, for 2 years now. Celebrated my 2 years a couple of weeks ago. But it was really the search that I had just before I came into this company that was it was challenging, but it was also motivational, because I had a really good mentor that helped me as I was trying to change industries. So I had come from a distribution business, and when I was looking for jobs, it was just only distribution that was looking out, even when I hadn't applied, they would look at my CVs, and I was like, I wasn't trying to be in this industry. And the best advice and motivation I got from my mentor was very similar to what you just said, Sarah, about values. She'd given me great advice to actually research companies that align to my values and see how they advertise their roles. So whether it was on LinkedIn or they advertised it on their website, research them for a few months and then only apply for those jobs. So if I was seeing other jobs coming up and they were tempting, I'd go back and look and say, actually, those don't align to my values, like, and don't align to the research I did. So yeah, although it was challenging, it was hard saying no to some because they were like really cool offers, but I'm so glad I did say no because I actually found somewhere that does align to my values. So yeah, thanks everyone.
That's great. And so interesting that you both had kind of really similar motivations in your kind of most recent job search. Speaking of which, we've got a poll for you guys in the audience, which I think is going to pop up hopefully now. So the question is, what motivates you the most during your job search? Is it learning new skills, financial stability, personal goals? Being in a new environment, using existing skills and strengths. I noticed that we don't have values on here. But yeah, I guess maybe that was something we should have added on. I think that's probably like super important, isn't it? About, do organizations kind of line up? I can see we've got financial stability as kind of popping up quite high on this, which I guess, yeah, makes total sense, doesn't it? It's a big part of why we start looking for jobs.
I think the values piece for me has only come in there in the last few years. When I was job hunting, in my early career, I probably naively didn't think about my values.
And what was it that kind of made that shift for you? What kind of made that become more important in what you were looking for?
Oh,
sorry, that was put you on the spot a bit there.
I think it was probably in 2019 when I guess my confidence was really knocked. Don't really know why. And then some things weren't really aligning for me. But again, I didn't really know why. And I think I'd lost my career ambition and what I was looking for. I hadn't really got a focus. I think that was the thing. I think I was meandering around, and I had to really get in touch with myself and my values.
Yeah, really interesting. So it's almost like it was part of a personal shift in how you felt about work, I guess. Yeah. I think, I think a lot of people have found that certainly since COVID, that values have become more important in the workplaces they're looking for. And I guess there's been so much change in the last few years. You want to know that you're working somewhere where they'll handle change in the way that you would, or that you want, or that you think is aligned to what you want. Great. So we've had some questions submitted when people registered. So I guess we'll kind of kick off with those and see how we get on. So the first one I'm going to ask to you, Crystal, is how do you know where to look? I feel overwhelmed with so many job sites, LinkedIn, Total Jobs, Indeed, etc., etc. How do you make sure that you don't miss a great job? I think it's quite interesting because you were talking about saying no to potentially great jobs, but how do you do that? Can you talk us through some strategies there?
Yeah, no, for sure, because there's so many places to look for jobs, isn't it? And then there's so many places you don't know about as well. Just in terms of what I was saying earlier about like actually doing your research, like the kind of maybe the industry or the company that you're looking at, maybe search and knows. I think maybe it might be easier to like search maybe like an industry and see like where do they advertise jobs to apply for, so that you don't miss that area. I think LinkedIn is also a really good place, not just for applying for jobs, but also for networking and seeing, when someone likes a job. The job I applied for, one of my contacts on LinkedIn that I'd worked with a few years had actually liked the post of my predecessor, who is my manager, who'd been promoted. And that had come onto my screen. So if I hadn't been on LinkedIn, not even going onto the job section, but actually the activity section, I wouldn't have seen that she'd been promoted, the job's coming up. And then I was like really looking for when that job was going to be advertised. But I think, like I said, in terms of doing that research, because you don't want to miss places because there's so many places, even social media as well. Like if you're maybe in a media industry that you're looking for, it may not be Total Jobs that the job is being applied for. So like I said, it's really important to do your research. That industry you're interested in, where do they advertise roles, and start going from there.
Yeah, great. Claire, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
Okay, so in certain industries, it has become very much that a lot of agencies are taking people on. In HR, we seem to sort of move towards that. Something like finance, it's absolutely, if you're looking for a sort of senior finance person, that's kind of often where you'll go. I think you get inundated. My LinkedIn is just full of people asking me to be their sort of contact in LinkedIn and stuff like that. And you can get a bit overwhelmed by that. But I would suggest maybe getting a couple of key people. I found often when I've been doing sort of networking and things, so either on LinkedIn or sometimes I've gone to events, and building a couple of people up that you trust, that they're people that you know are not going to just palm you off with some rubbish, but really be clear with them about what you're looking for, what your skills are, and really, you know, nurture that relationship. You need to perhaps keep going back to them as well. They've got lots of people, but perhaps that can often work. And I have to admit, the post I'm in at the moment, I'm on a maternity cover. That was through one of the agencies that you know, I'd got that before. And in fact, the job before that, they approached me, they headhunted me, but they were an agency again I'd had some knowledge of before. So that can work very well. But you know, very much networking is going to be my answer to a lot of these things at the moment.
Yeah, networking is super important, isn't it? And great shout about agencies. I think that can be sometimes like a good way of getting your foot in the door. If you kind of feel like you're struggling one way, sometimes going through an agency route can just be a way of yeah, like opening up your options there a bit. Great. So our next question is entry-level roles are almost unavailable as every employer seems to be asking for experience, which I do not possess currently. What should I do? I think this is a great question, and I think we've probably all been there, haven't we? That, you know, everyone starts off with no experience, don't you? So, and even like you were saying, Crystal, about changing sectors, sometimes you can feel like you're starting again, no experience. So yeah, Sarah, do you want to take this one about yeah, what should someone do if they feel like they're struggling to find entry-level roles and they don't know how to get that start?
I've heard this a lot through the branch network, and it is really, you know, it does hurt me, you know, when when our members are coming to us for advice, you know, they've got master's degrees in HR and they just cannot get that first, you know, foot on the rung. And I'd say it's about flipping your skills, I think, and really focusing on what the skills and criteria and abilities are needed for a HR operations type role, or whatever role it is you're looking for, and thinking, how is what I'm doing currently transferable to that role? And then it's trying to sell that really on your CV, your application, and really saying this is the value that I can add through this skill. So I might not be in HR currently, but you're trying to get across the knowledge that you have got about HR and how you would apply it with your current skills.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah. And how about you, Claire? Do you have any advice for
Yeah,
someone who's just
I
kind of starting out?
I do, because when I was first starting out, I was in the hotel and catering industry. I was just, you know, I was working as managing hotels and things. And actually, I really wanted to get into HR and found exactly that. It was really, really difficult to get in. So, in fact, I ended up taking a sort of, as was then, this is many years ago, a sort of secretary there in an HR department. I had no secretarial skills, had to do a typing course actually to do it. But it was a very much just sort of a way to find yourself way in. So maybe if you can find yourself something which is working alongside HR, working short-term contracts sometimes, working as the temp through an agency. I'm don't work for agencies, but working as an agency, just finding a way to get just that little bit of experience. It may not be very glamorous initially, but just finding a way to get a sort of side door in and things. So yes, I would say that's possibly the way.
Great. Yeah, thanks. So our next question is
Sorry, Zoe, just on that
yeah,
note,
go
because I
on.
think actually volunteering could be an option.
Yes.
So, you know,
Yes,
especially with
absolutely.
charities who are struggling, you know, to recruit and don't have the money, you could offer and volunteer your time and set projects maybe to get some experience, and they might give you a reference as well.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
I think that's a great idea. And particularly, I know we've talked a lot about getting into HR, but this was a more general question. And I think that's such good advice for someone who's just looking for anything. Like, there are so many opportunities for volunteering. I know it's not for everyone, and I know it's not always possible, but just getting some of that, like, examples that you can use in your kind of job application materials and things, I think is so useful. So yeah, if you are feeling a bit stuck, I would definitely think about looking at what volunteering opportunities are out there. And particularly, there's an organisation called Reach Volunteering who do like skilled volunteering, and they do kind of placements for people who are looking to use their skills in a kind of semi-professional way. So we definitely recommend looking at that sort of thing. And if nothing else, it just gets you out and gets you doing something that's not your job search. So totally worth it. I'm a big fan of anything that gets you talking to people about other stuff. So yeah, definitely great idea. Thanks, Sarah. So our next question is about how to balance job searching as an independent consultant while running your own business. So this is a kind of one of these things about I thought this was an interesting question about sort of how do you're kind of, if you've got a business that you're running on the side maybe, and you're kind of looking for work at the same time, how do you balance those things? And is that how do you kind of keep going when you've got a few things going on work-wise? I wonder if, Sarah, I can see you nodding. Do you have any particular thoughts about this?
Well, I'm not an independent consultant, but I am juggling a few things at the moment. So if I was to be job searching at the moment, then I'd be prioritising the time and really being disciplined with my time to still keep your CVs updated and tailored to it. It can be quite a big job, I know, job hunting, but it is really important to tailor your CV and tailor those applications to that company that you're applying for. So it's about carving out that time if it's important.
Yeah, definitely. And Claire, I know that you've kind of had quite a few jobs over the years. Is this something that you've kind of had to balance, having multiple priorities?
And I'm moving towards consultancy in the sort of by the summertime this year. So that'll be an interesting question. You can ask me that then. But actually, yes, it is. I mean, I think it is a bit about taking on work. I mean, it's going back to that thing that Krista was saying earlier. It's easy to sort of snatch out at work and things like that. But if you're actually going to be taking on work alongside doing consultancy, you are wanting to improve your CV as well. So, perhaps taking opportunities which are actually going to enhance your CV, or that are going to, again, network you in, if you're taking jobs where they can then perhaps offer you some consultancy work on the back of it. So perhaps looking at things that are actually going to enhance your consultancy work would be to me, a good plan, I think.
Great, thank you. And so this next question I think is perfect for you, Crystal. How do you stay resilient when you're being told you're too good for a job, but you've realigned on the type of role that gives you the most energy? So I think this is similar, but not the same as what you were talking about, you've kind of decided what you're looking for, but how do you find that? How do you deal with people maybe thinking, why have you made this change?
Yeah, there's so many reasons why you get this being told to you, and it's very frustrating when someone says, you're too experienced, you're too good. It's like, I've made a decision to apply for this job because this is what I want to do. But sometimes it's really important to just communicate your intentions, because sometimes the other side could be just worried that, you're going to come in and after 6 months, probably the hiring managers are worried that after a few months, you're going to get apply for another job internally. It just, maybe that job is just your way into the company, and you don't really want to stay within a team, and then you have to recruit again. So it's really important to just really communicate why you've applied for that role. Even if sometimes it's even good to communicate even before they even say that, because you're thinking, I know I'm going to get this question up. So if you're using a recruiter or an agency, just be upfront and communicate, why you've applied for the job. And then I also feel if you're being told you're too good, sometimes and they don't see how special your too good is, then maybe they're not the best place for you. They're not going to value what you offer, because being too good and you've applied for this job, I'd be like, wow, this person's going to bring so much to the role if I was hiring. So if they can't see that special part of what you can offer and respect your career goals and respect why you've applied for the role, then maybe you need to like reframe, is this the company for you? And then also like your network as well are really there to kind of help you like with encouragement and keep you motivated and keep on applying, because when you're being told that it's not feedback that you can work on. So it's not like you can be like, okay, I can work on this. So it can be quite demoralizing. So just really lean into your network, your mentors, that support system that you have around you. That's kind of advice I'd give.
Yeah, I think that's like so important. I think sometimes we talk a lot about like it's so important to get feedback at work, and like when you're job hunting, that's also really important. And obviously it really is, but I think sometimes it's useful to know what is feedback that you can ignore or not, that you can't action. Like I think that's super important. So Claire, I know obviously you've done a lot of hiring. What is going through your mind as someone kind of, you know, if you're hiring someone and you're thinking this, which I guess sometimes you are thinking, like what are you thinking, and what would make you change your mind there?
It is very difficult, because you do look at people, you often, and particularly in the climate that we've sort of hopefully coming out of, but obviously again during the COVID and things like that, you know, you had people applying for jobs that were at a far more junior level. So I would agree with Crystal that it's been very clear why you're wanting to do it, because otherwise you inevitably sort of jump to the conclusion, well, what, you know, why are they wanting to do this? They've got skills that are far beyond this, and is this a stopgap and all those things? So I think to be very clear about your reasons for it. And interestingly, it's just what I've just done. So I've been, as I say, to director level for a number of years, and actually have decided, you know what, that's not what I enjoy doing. I don't enjoy sitting on tables and group, you know, meetings and things all the time. I actually enjoy the operational stuff. And it was initially quite a challenge, but in fact, as I was very, very clear with the recruiting agency, etc., and other people, this is what I'm wanting to do. This is where I'm heading with this. I've really thought this through quite hard. And the reasons are I like doing the, you know, operational work, etc. So I think it is, as a recruiter, it is hard when you've got someone like that in front of you, if they haven't given you any reason. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think we had a question which we haven't included here, which someone felt that they were being challenged in interviews a lot when they were being asked these types of questions. And I guess, I mean, maybe Sarah, you could like, how can people reframe those kinds of questions? Because sometimes it can feel a bit like you just want to go, but I've applied for this, so you should just trust me. Like there was the question in particular was about like travel, and I can totally see that you've applied for a job and you've already thought about the commute, but I know that from the perspective of hiring, that sometimes you're worried that people haven't thought those things through. So how can you reframe that in like a positive way?
Yeah, I think there's two aspects as well, because I imagine if you've been going through a lot of interviews and you keep getting the same questions, it can be really, you know, soul destroying, and you probably can be a bit negative, like feel a bit negative about it. So it's about making sure that doesn't come across in your answer, sort of, you know, being upbeat about it, even if you're not feeling that way. But really, if you start to get those types of questions a couple of times, is really think for your, you know, why are you wanting this role? And then get that across to them. Or there might be an icebreaker question perhaps in the interview. So you could start, you know, start with that from the off by saying, you know, how it aligns to your values or what it is that you're looking for next and the reason why.
Yeah.
Did I answer your questions?
No, that was great. Yeah. I think it is just about, like thinking, it's not necessarily a challenge, isn't it? You could just got to think, positively about, answer it positively. And I think you're absolutely right. If you're getting it a few times, I mean, Crystal said this at the beginning, like, can you get it in earlier so that you're getting ahead of the game? Yeah, because I think if you hear something from a few different interviews, then it probably is something that people are really thinking about when they look at your CV. So yeah,
I think as well, with questions that you get asked, obviously answer the question that's put to you. But if you then get time to be able to flip something, it's hard to think off the top of my head, but use things as an opportunity to say, oh, I appreciate I might not have the full skills around this, but this is what I do know, or this is what I can do. Or I appreciate that this role is lower than I've been operating at, but I understand the role really well, and this is what I could do, and this is what I can add to it. A bit like Crystal said, actually, they're getting a lot more value and somebody very special. It's just then convincing them that you're going to stay and it's not a stepping stone.
And I suppose to add to that, so as in a more general way, you were sort of also bringing in people who were long, far away and things like that. Actually, as a recruiter, you think that people have thought these things through. The number of times people really haven't, and arrive on day one and you discover they haven't thought through their childcare arrangements. They haven't thought how long it's going to take them. So actually, as a recruiter, you know, it is fair for them to be asking you those things, and for you to be honest about it with yourself and with them about thinking through your application and why you're doing it. Particularly if you're getting a bit desperate, it's you think, oh my gosh, 100 miles is fine, I'll do that. But actually, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's that I guess if you've thought it through and you thought that was obvious, it can feel a bit challenging, can't it? But it's useful to hear that people don't always think about that. And childcare in particular, I think, is one. I know that comes up fairly often. I know people are a bit like, oh, you know, I don't like people asking about this. But yeah, good to hear that there is like solid reasoning for that. Yeah, thank you. Great. So we've got our next little poll question just to check that everyone is still paying attention. So this is a question for you all. How do you celebrate small achievements in your job search? So we know that this is like super important. Crystal's kind of touched on this a little bit anyway, but like what do you do to celebrate that kind of something's gone well? How do you keep that motivation up basically as you're going through your job search? Oh, nice. I can see we've got someone saying do something nice. Yeah, I always found that like doing things that weren't like having specific time that's not job search related is super important for me. So just like going, right, okay, I've done this many applications or whatever, and saying like, oh, okay, I've got an hour. Do any of you guys on the panel have things that you do to kind of keep yourself motivated when you're doing job searching or doing other things and work, I guess? Are there little tricks that you have to celebrate those small achievements?
Yeah, I mean, just similar to what you just said about like timing. So like when I'd be looking for a job, I would strategically like put in the times I would be applying for jobs. So I wanted to apply between like this hours of like, I think it was like 7 a.m. in the morning or some 6:30 in the morning until about 1, because I was like, no one's gonna read anything afterwards. They're not gonna, the agencies I'm talking about, they're not going to do anything afterwards. So why should I use my afternoon and my evening to apply for jobs? They're probably going to post a job in the evening. So therefore I want to be one of the first people they see when they come and say like their laptop, their desk in the morning. So actually I'm going to prioritize my like mental health, my well-being, self-care during those other hours. Like, you know, that's what I'm going to do. That's going to be my time, rather than like, oh, I'm going to like see a ping and I'm going to apply for a job, because they may not see it with everyone else's CVs and applications. So these are my core hours, and the rest is my time. Whether I want to watch EastEnders or have a glass of wine, that's what I'll do. And this has been even my mindset, even when I've been made redundant. Like, I'm not sitting here and being like, oh, it's always been great, like finding a job. It's not. It's really hard. So you do really have to like be mindful of like how like it can affect you, and what are those little things that you can do to just like make yourself happy. Because you may look at the day and see like, I applied for like 50 jobs or 100 jobs and then I heard nothing this week. But then if you look back, actually, yeah, I applied for 100 jobs. I got up early, which was good for me because I'm not a morning person. I got up early, I did that, and then actually I went for a walk afterwards, or I went to have a swim this week. So those are my wins for this week, rather than I applied for 100 jobs and no one got back to me this week. So yeah, that's some of the stuff I've done.
And it's
Yeah.
also quite helpful to reach out to other people if you've got other people, within your friendship network, talk to other people, because otherwise you can just think, is it me? Am I just hopeless? But actually you'll probably find other people in the same sort of boat, and that's always very, very reassuring. And
I
again,
think it's about,
sorry, no, Karen.
I think it's about celebrating what you're learning whilst applying for the roles as well, because you're tailoring your CV, you're writing the application forms, you're keeping those on your computers for future, you're researching about the companies, so you can use all of that still with other things that you apply for. So celebrating all of those things, and I never used to do it, and a bit like Crystal said, you're applying for 100 jobs, tick, I've applied for that job today. That's a celebration, because it can be disheartening, but you've done it, so celebrate that. You've updated your CV, celebrate that. Celebrate everything.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And I think every time, I think every job application is like another step, isn't it? Like you've probably done a little bit more polishing. You've got like another cover letter that you can pull bits out of, whatever it is. Like, so you're kind of building up that bank of good stuff that you can use for the next job application, and it just does become easier and easier. And it will get better and better. I can see that from our audience, we've had a few people saying cakes, which is great. Love that. Big fan of just like some sweet treats. Very good. And also some really good ones around recording positive feedback and making sure that you're saving like nice comments from people. I think that's really good. And actually, I think that's one of the things about job searching, isn't it? Like sometimes you do get feedback, and sometimes that feedback can be like lovely, but you still didn't get the job. And sometimes you do need to think, okay, that's good. I need to put that in the good column. A bit like you were saying, Crystal, about not thinking about, oh, I've applied for this many and I didn't hear back. It's thinking like, what can I see as a celebration? And yeah, absolutely. Like, I think that scheduling time is like so important. I think especially with things like LinkedIn and stuff, and where things just kind of can sort of take over and everything is live all the time and you can always feel like you could be doing more. I think it's so important just to go, right, this is my time that I'm, focusing on the job search, and this is the time that I'm focusing on me, because actually that the focusing on me bit also helps the job search bit. So they're so entwined. Great. So our next question is, we as candidates don't really have the option to leave feedback about a bad interview, how badly it was conducted, etc., whereas organisations have an option to give feedback to their candidates. What can I do with the frustration that I feel when I feel like an interview has been bad? Claire, do you want to take this one to start off with?
I do. I was sharing just before we started. Yes, I've had quite a few bad interviews, but one particularly sticks in my mind, which I was particularly keen on. I'd sort of had three different interviews and came through to the final interview stage with a senior person in a big charity. So I won't name names, but big charity. Thought it had gone really well. I thought I'd really got a rapport and I'd answered the questions well. I heard nothing. Ever, not that you haven't got the job, that anything at all, just nothing. I messaged them and asked obviously for feedback, nothing again, just very disappointing. You can do all the sorts of things which you could go on Glassdoor and all sorts of things like that. Actually, though, in reality, I'm not sure it's actually going to, it sometimes just looks a bit sort of malicious, whatever. I suppose what I've taken from it, I think sometimes you have to just take a step back and think, okay, that I've learned from that. I realised that again my values don't align with that company, but I've also taken away from it that actually I wouldn't treat people like that going forwards, and have used it as a moving things forward. And I'm very, very big on coming back to people now for any application or anything that they do, to give them feedback. I know what it's like, so maybe you take it on as a learning. That's my experience.
Yeah, that's great. Sarah, I can see you nodding. Do you have any other thoughts about that?
I think it depends on how it's gone badly, because I think, as Claire already said, you know, if they're going to treat you badly through the recruitment process and at the interview, then that's a reflection of their culture, and you're probably actually quite lucky to not hear back at all, or to be regretted. I don't really feel there's any value in writing a complaint, because it's just energy. It's just, you know, whilst you're writing that complaint, whether it's an email or what have you, you could be looking for something else, and it's not a reflection on you. It's a reflection on them. If it was a bad interview because something had gone, you know, you'd tripped over some questions, you hadn't answered those as well as perhaps you wanted to, then yes, reach out and try and get some feedback, and personalize that there, and say how you felt that it didn't go as well as you would have liked, and you'd really like to improve on that. Would they mind giving you some feedback? But at the end of the day, if they don't respond, it's completely out of your control, so don't waste that energy.
Right. Yeah, thanks. I think that's super important, isn't it? About like you can expend a lot of energy feeling cross about something that you can't actually change, which is job searching generally, and a lot of work is like that. But yeah, I think super important just to almost like draw a line and go, right, okay, that's done, and like moving on now. Yeah, definitely. Next question, this is for you, Crystal, I think. So the gap in my CV due to raising a young family really knocks my confidence in attaining interviews. There is a lot of talk about it not mattering. However, the reality is it does matter. This is what the person has written, by the way. This isn't my specific perspective. And she says, recruiters overlook applications. How do we overcome this apart from networking? So do you have any thoughts about what someone can do about the gap on their CV? And I guess particularly about their confidence around it, because obviously those two things go hand in hand, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, I get really annoyed when people are made to feel this way, because you know, if you've taken out a gap, you know, to raise a family or to care for somebody, like that's so much strength and so much bravery to do, to step away from maybe something that you're used to, your career, and to do something else. And there are so much you've learned from that, that you need to highlight that in your CV, that experience, because sometimes when I've seen CVs, it's like, you know, took up 2 years to look after my mum or to look after kids, and that's it. I'm like, no, like you have so much, like getting up every single day, like, you know, the resilience you've shown in that. You may have been responsible for accounts for them. There's so much responsibilities that you've had in that time, that you probably wouldn't even learn those responsibilities in an office job or whatever job you were doing before. So please do highlight that. See it as like it was a job. You know, being a mother, it is a full-time job, like more than a full-time job. So please do like write down like what you learned, what you did, your responsibilities, because they're a lot of the stuff that you've done are transferable skills into a workplace, that's in an office workplace. So yeah, just kind of like look at yourself and be like, yeah, you know what, I've done really great these few years. And hopefully that sometimes when you write things down, it helps your confidence, because you look back and you're like, yeah, I actually did this. I am a superpower. So hopefully that does help. And yeah, I think during the time, if you've done any continuous learning, so any sort of, whether it was like volunteering, or you did any online courses, or attended any events that helped, like, you know, if you went to like this ACE, for example, anything like that, put that in your CV to show like during that time, these are the continuous learnings that you were doing. I think hopefully that will help. But yeah, it's not, I get network also can be like quite nerve-wracking as well, going to networking events. That it can be an opportunity as well, but it can be quite hurtful, not hurtful, so I'm getting my words all mixed up. It can be quite a lot. But you know, even coming to this session today, like you could put that in your CV. You've come to a session, like, you know, to learn about, you know, your CV, learn about job hunt. That's all development that you're doing for yourself. Any of the CIPD webinars and courses that you go on, just write that on your CV as well. So yeah, that'd be a bit of my advice.
That's great. Thank you. And Sarah, I wonder if you could give us a bit of the kind of the sort of HR hiring manager perspective. What is it that people are concerned about when they see that someone's got a gap on their CV? What are the worries, and how can people kind of like overcome them in the way they present themselves?
Yeah, I think it's that not having that information, because if people have just said that they've just got a gap, so okay, how are you current, I guess? And it's linking to what Crystal said. So if you can preempt that and be proactive, that will really put that ease at mind, I guess. It's because I guess people are thinking there's going to be quite a period of time of upskilling perhaps that person. If they've been away from the workplace for 18 months, 2 years, perhaps that might be what they're thinking. So we've got to get somebody back up to a particular standard, even though actually, you might be listening to podcasts whilst you're looking after your child. You might be doing that CPD stuff, like Crystal said, with the transferable skills for accounts, or just being a listening ear to maybe somebody who's poorly. Whatever those things are that you've been doing, there is a lot of value in it. So it's getting that across.
And I think to just quickly add, also there are I'm the advocate of agencies today, aren't I? But actually there are some of the agencies have set themselves up now for people who were coming back, sort of 10 to 2 is one of the ones I know, where they're looking at sort of supporting people who've had time out that's specifically set up for that. So some of them can be quite helpful. And I suppose also sometimes then actually taking a sort of a bit of a step down and recognizing that perhaps to get back up again to where you were, it'll only take a little while, but you might just have to take a job at a sort of lower level initially to be able to sort of get yourself back into it. You can then, whiz back up again with your experience, but it's just, I agree with Sarah, it's that, looking at people's CVs as the hiring manager. If you've got a load of CVs in front of you, the tried and tested person who's currently in a job or whatever is probably the person who's going to stand out. So it is a challenge, but I also agree with Crystal that all of those skills are so necessary and important. But I think that's from an employer's point of view, those are the sorts of things they might be looking at as negatives.
Yeah, I once had a colleague she ran a whole session on how to be more productive, and at the very end she just said that the one thing that actually made her more productive was having kids, because she just, you have to multitask so much. She was like, actually that's the only bit of advice that I can really give, is like, just have children and you will end up doing it. So
but
yeah,
you're teaching
absolutely.
them as well, aren't they? You're teaching them as they're growing, so it's about trying to be clever, I think, with getting that across on your CVs and application forms.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a shame people have to do it in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Right. I think we've got time for a few questions from the chat. So let me see. Okay, yeah. So we've got someone has asked, this is for you, Crystal. Says, Crystal, I'm a job switcher as you were, and it's extremely difficult to get into a new industry because of lack of experience, qualifications, network, etc. What advice can you give regarding job searching in a new industry?
I'm just saying, is that one of the ones I replied to? Or
Oh,
no,
possibly you
I
have. Sorry.
I know I was going in the chat, but I wasn't quite sure. But sorry, can you read the question again? I'm just searching through the questions.
So it was about someone wanting to switch industries, but not having any of the relevant connections or experience. What advice do you have for that? Kind of how to switch industries?
Yeah, I mean, I think I did reply this one. I mean, I feel like people are people. I've worked in a few industries and no one's really surprised me. Like the same HR issues come out, whether you're in retail, whether you're in like a law firm, like people are just people. So it's really important that you kind of get across like how you've worked with people, how you've done like those skills that you have. But then also seeing, although that people are people, there are some stuff, some experience you've had in one industry that could be really beneficial for another industry. even if you're going from like public to private or private to public, there'll be some things that you've learned in that are really good transferable skills. So it's getting ahead, like we've said already today, but saying like, yes, whilst I haven't worked in this industry, I've done a lot of research into this. This is the reason why I want to get into it, and I feel like I can bring, you know, this learning or this development or these like values that I've learned and from this industry into this that would really benefit your business. It's just really important to get that across, because I feel, especially when you're looking in HR as well, I think we're so harsh when people want to swap industries. You know, we'll look at a CV and be like, oh no, like they've worked there, they wouldn't fit here, but actually they would. So yeah, it's just really important to kind of get that across, like what you could bring from your previous one. But at the end of the day, people is my mantra. I'd be surprised if someone can tell me something different about people being different in different industries. But yeah.
And Claire, do you have anything to add to that? I guess thinking specifically not just about HR, but also about people moving industry more generally. Like,
yeah, I mean, it is difficult. And Crystal mentioned the public-private sector sort of thing, which is so I've worked in public and private, and actually there is a real, almost like a snobbery against it, really. It almost feels like, oh, you've worked in the public sector, you're not going to be very good on that, and so I would agree with Crystal that it's very much about bringing out the skills, showing them, you know, on your CV, the actual skills you've got. You know, if you have a CV that's around skills and achievements and what you've brought to the organisations you've been in and so on, those are going to be across all organisations, are going to be important there. I think it's accepting there is that sort of snobbery, but as you say, finding a way to, you know, to go it in there if that's what you want. And I think doing also your research on there. Initially, as I said, I've just moved into education at the moment, and it's, having worked in the healthcare sector for ages, knowing so much about it. You know, you asked me how much a nurse should earn and what, you know, what allowances, etc. To move to somewhere where I don't know everything is sometimes initially challenging, but actually for me, that's exciting. It's nice to have something different. And hopefully I brought that across into the interview, where I was sort of saying to them, actually, I know that there are things I won't know, but actually there are other things I can bring. So I do, yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah, sometimes that outside perspective is can be really valuable to a business. You almost need to just push that a little bit and say, look, I'm not from this sector, but actually I've got really, you know, I could bring some really interesting insights that you won't have thought of. Yeah. That's really interesting. And I totally know what you mean about the public-private divide. It's always interesting to hear how other people talk about other sectors. You're like, oh, okay, yeah. I mean, you're all just businesses at the end of the day.
Exactly.
So we've got another question that was kind of off some of the stuff we were talking about earlier, which was what examples do you suggest of feedback to ignore and what to act upon? So we kind of talked about that when you're getting feedback that, you know, you're kind of too good for a job and that, you know, there's not much you can do with that. I wonder, Sarah, if you've got any examples of kind of what can you take on board, what maybe do you know is good to just think, okay, I'm going to ignore that.
Yeah, I think it's important to put your ego aside and really think about the feedback. And okay, they might be wrong, but actually, is there anything that you can do around some reflection? Was it the way you answered a question that gave them the wrong impression somehow? Because it could be a communication misalignment. But I would say really delve into it and ask yourself some honest questions about whether you do need to improve on something. But if it's the feedback that you're too good for things, then it is what Crystal was talking about earlier, about really proactively telling people why you're wanting that particular role.
Yeah, that's great. Crystal, do you have anything more to add on that?
Yeah, I was just thinking about when I'd gotten feedback that I thought wasn't worth me keeping inside. I think, you know, feedback in itself is something you can make a decision, isn't it? You can put your ego aside, you can make a decision whether you want to take that feedback on or ignore it. And some feedback is to be ignored. Some feedback, and feedback is to be taken on as well. Like if you feel like you've heard it maybe more than once in an interview, or if you feel like actually the feedback that they've given was actually a really good strength of yours. I was thinking about very early in my career, I'd got feedback that I intimidated the interviewer by having like a notebook where I was writing questions and just what they were saying. I was writing some notes down, and I always feel like an interview is two ways. So that's why I was like, obviously writing some notes and stuff, and that was feedback. And I could have been in that moment for, oh gosh, I should never have a notebook like that. But actually, it was good to have a notebook. That's what I'm saying. Some feedback is like to ignore. Maybe that was how the person personally was made to feel. But some feedback, you would think, okay, actually, I've heard this a couple of times. Maybe it's something for me to just like take on and adapt. And like Sarah said, like put that ego to a side. But don't go into it feeling like you have to take every single thing that someone says about you. Because yeah.
I think
that's such a great example.
That's a good one.
You might need a notebook for any number of reasons. I mean, sometimes I can't remember a whole question, so I need to write it down. I'd rather write it down than keep asking to repeat it.
I also, I would always write down the questions from an interview because they're good to have when you're preparing for the next interview. So why wouldn't you do that? Also, notebooks, like, it's just like it's super useful.
Yeah, it's a small one as well.
I think that's like a great example, because I think sometimes you can get feedback that you're like, okay, that's like very subjective, and I don't want to act on that, because actually that's not I don't want to work somewhere where that's the case. Claire, were you about to say something? Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I just remembered something. So I've been told on various occasions that I'm too people-y. And at first I was a bit like, well, what's wrong with that? That's a good thing. And I've started to reflect on it. And it's probably something I may need to balance a little bit more. But at the end of the day, it's who I am and it's my values. So, maybe I need to think about the organisations, and it relates to my current role as well, and how I'm carrying out my activity. And so it's in my mind when I'm sort of dealing with an initiative or practice or something, do I need to think about the organisation a little bit more? Do I need to think about the person more? But I've got to keep my values in alignment.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, isn't it? About how you take feedback on. It's not just responding to it. It's thinking about how can I respond to this in a way that still aligns with who I am and what I value. I think that's so important, and I think there's nothing worse than trying to respond to feedback that then puts you in a position where you're behaving unnaturally, because that's actually going to make things so much worse. So like your notebook example, Crystal, like if you then had to like do interviews without a notebook, well then you'd be much less like prepared. You wouldn't have your kind of prop, so that's not going to create a good experience. So yeah, I think those things are like, it's not just about, do I take this on board, do I not take this on board? It's also about how can I respond to this in a way that aligns with my values. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. That's such a great point.
Quick one on that. Just a very quick one on that was I got feedback during an interview one of the interviewers said to me, and breathe, Claire. In other words, I know I talk a lot, and actually she was like, and breathe. And it's resonated with me every interview I've ever done since then. I think, right, and breathe. I need to stop and reflect, actually. And it was about the best bit of advice I'd got. So actually something like that.
Yeah, perfect. And actually that's another really great example, isn't it? About being who you are, but also like where do you need to slightly temper things without compromising on who you are. And breathe is great advice for anyone, I would say. We probably don't do it enough. Everyone should just take a beat and have a nice deep breath. Great. Well, we're nearing the end of our time, so I think we've got an evaluation form that we'd like you all to fill out. I think one of my colleagues is going to share it in the chat, so hopefully you can all get clicking away and giving us some feedback about how you found today. And I guess I'm just going to ask, while you're all doing that in the audience, I'm going to ask the panel just to give us some kind of final closing thoughts on how people can just keep really positive and motivated during their job search. Yeah, Claire, do you want to just go, what's kind of one thing you want people to take away from today?
I think it's remaining positive about yourself, recognizing that, because there was a question somewhere there about, you know, that you see so many people applying. If you look, you're on LinkedIn and you see 100 people have looked, but actually in reality, a lot of those people will have not gone as far as actually applying and will not be suitable. They'll have just pinged on and sent a CV through. That can be so off-putting. So if you really feel you're the right person for the role, yes, get your application in a, make sure that you've put the letter with it, an appropriate letter with it, looked at your application, made sure it's aimed towards the actual role you're applying for, and don't just think, oh, there's too many people, I'm not going to be the best, and so on. You may very well be, and yeah, don't be put off.
Right. Yeah, I think that's great advice. And Sarah, one piece of advice you want people to take away?
I think for me, it is easier said than done, because if you're applying for a role, you really probably want it, but it's about trying to be detached from it, actually. And maybe being a bit strategic about it, doing your research, getting that across, and then letting what will be, because if you're too excited about it, or if you're too hung up on it, that is really going to affect you. And actually, there's probably one job, there might be 10 people that have applied, or as LinkedIn shows us, 750 have applied for one job just because you've looked at it. Try not to let that affect who you are.
Yeah, brilliant. That's really great. And Crystal, finally.
Yeah, really good advice from you both. I think I go back to the values part, because that's been probably the biggest learning that I've been given. And like you, Sarah, said, it wasn't something I used to think about before. And if it's anything that you guys haven't thought about before, definitely like what aligns to your values, because you know it's never worth like changing your values and not being who you are. You are your own superpower, and just remembering why you're applying for that job and why you want to go to that company. Yeah, just like reframe your mind when you're applying for roles, because what you don't want to do is just rush into something. And I get, you know, sometimes it's really hard, you don't have a job and you're looking, but it's best to take that time and do that research and go to somewhere where they're gonna welcome you, you're gonna feel included, you're gonna be valued, rather than somewhere that you rushed and just went to, and then a few weeks, a few months down the line, you're not happy, and your happiness is worth so much more. So yes, whilst it gets hard and you need to find a role, don't just go anywhere. That's not going to make you feel like you're the best person that they've recruited for, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's fabulous advice. And I would just add onto the end of that, one thing to remember is you're not alone in this. I think we've heard from all three of you that, you know, job searching can be really hard. It's really lonely. It can be very demoralizing. You know, you can see in the chat that, you know, you guys aren't alone. So don't feel, it can feel, I think, very lonely sometimes, but you really aren't alone. And also, on the other side of every job application process, they're just people like our lovely panel. So, you know, don't be intimidated by it. People are people, and you'll get there in the end. You just need to keep going, I think. Absolutely. Great. Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much to our fantastic panel, Claire, Sarah, and Crystal. You've been amazing. This has just been so interesting. I think we've learned so much. So, yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Good luck, everyone.
Yes, good luck.